Hey, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Sandra Romero, Assistant Director for the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. Today, I will be facilitating the webinar, African American History Meets Artificial Intelligence in the 21st Century. Before I begin, I would like to give thanks to the linguistic team, community leaders, and to the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program for joining us today. The webinar is part of the Reanimating African American Oral Histories of the Gulf South project, which has been possible in part by a major grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. This project has been initiated since 2021. Now, before we begin the program, if you have any questions for any of our panelists, please feel free to add your questions on the Q&A icon. We will get to your questions at the end of the program. We would like to begin the program by showcasing the power of oral history by playing a 1-minute clip from our beloved community leader, civil rights activist, educator, and friend that has unfortunately passed away. I present Ms. Margaret Block.
But it's just that I think I didn't miss that that whole experience of being on campus and hanging out and partying all night and pledging, being in their sororities and stuff. Some of my friends now be sitting around talking about, oh, what did you pledge, Mark? I tell them all the time, I pledge SNCC.
All right.
They know what I'm talking about. They deltas and AKAs.
Right.
And I'm telling them, well, I pledge SNCC, okay? I'm saying, well, you should have. You my age. You should have been in SNCC too, instead of wasting your time with a sorority. What y'all do? Nothing. September was amazing. If you know about Ella Baker, then she's a kind of an Ella Baker, because she was in South Carolina, in the Carolinas, the Sea Island and all of that, and it was her idea to have citizenship schools. That was her idea, and nobody ever talk about September, Miss Clark.
Okay, now we will move towards a welcome statement from Professor of History and Director of SPOP, Dr. Paul Ortiz.
Thank you so much, Adolfo. Well, on behalf of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida, I want to welcome each and every one of you to this really amazing webinar, public history program, and we're going to learn so much today and hear from so many different voices. I'm really thrilled to be here with so many great colleagues, friends, members of the community. My name is Paul Ortiz. I'm a professor of history, and I direct the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at the University of Florida. And since 2009, we have been pursuing an oral history research project which we'll be talking about this afternoon. This project is now called the Joel Buchanan African American Oral History Archive. It's housed at the University of Florida Digital Collections. Many of you, of course, know and remember and love Joel Buchanan. Joel Buchanan was a trailblazing civil rights activist. He was a dear friend. He was a great educator. He was really the premier a Black history scholar of this area for so many years, a librarian at the University of Florida. When I got to UF in 2008, he approached me and my dear friend Marna Weston and said, follow me, guys. We're going to take a walk over to the office of the president because we're going to talk to President Bernie Machen about supporting a new African-American oral history project to interview Black elders in Gainesville, Alachua County, and throughout Florida about what their lives were like before and leading up to the civil rights movement. These are people who came of age maybe in the 1930s, 1940s. And Joel was so passionate about this. And I remember Marna and I said, well, Joel, where's the money going to come from? He said, we're going to go straight to the president's office. So we went straight to President Machen's office. We received tremendous support. We gave him a written plan. He said, what's the benefit of this oral history archive at the University of Florida? And our response was the benefit is threefold. Number one, it's going to become one of the premier archives of African-American history in the world. So it's going to help put UF on the map in terms of African-American history. Benefit number two, recruitment, retention of African-American scholars, both undergraduate, graduate students and faculty. And that's already been happening. They don't have to travel. They can go directly to this growing archive of 1,000+ oral histories with Black elders. And really the benefit number 3 was this is going to create a two-way information superhighway, if you will. I know we don't use the phrase anymore, of great information and knowledge between the region, between African-American communities and the University of Florida. And we're going to learn from the people who sustain this campus, who literally built the University of Florida, were building the University of Florida, even when they were not allowed to attend here as students. And so the stories that you'll hear in this archive are from people from all over the South, people who are pioneering civil rights activists, people who are the first in their town to go to a white school, people like Joel Buchanan, whose interview is in the archive. And you're going to hear a lot of firsts. You're also going to hear stories about what it was like for a person who had to fight, who had to struggle just to earn the right to register to vote. And then the moment they heard the announcement, Barack Obama has been elected president of the United States of America, the kind of impact that had on them. You're going to hear people talk about stories growing up about slavery and the impact of lynching on their families. You're also going to hear stories of tremendous joy and fellowship and faith and striving. But this project, Reanimating African-American Oral Histories, is a project which allows us to not just do the oral histories, because as I mentioned, we have over 1,000 of those and they're growing. Every day, every week, you have students, grads and undergrads, members of the community are doing these oral histories. But here's a challenge. We're trained to do oral history. I was trained at Duke University to be an oral historian, but I have no experience in K through 12 educational curriculum. And the goal all along, my friends, was to not just do the interviews and not just document them, but the people we interviewed, who we call our narrators, gave their life stories and their interviews to us on one condition. The charge was share these stories with younger people. We want younger people. We want, whether they're at UF or Santa Fe College or whether they don't go to college at all, we want especially high school and middle school children to learn our histories. To stony the road we trod, but we made it. We want them to understand what it took to reach this point in our history. And so that was always a charge that challenged us and pushed us, because again, as I mentioned earlier, I don't have any training. I never taught in a K through 12 educational environment. And so this project we're talking about today, Reanimating African American Oral Histories, supported by the National Endowment for the Humanities, funded by the Office of the Provost of the University of Florida at its inception. This new project allows us to take those oral histories and to get them out into the world, to get them into classrooms, to get them into churches, to get them into whether it's a university classroom or a classroom in Putnam County or Duval County. So I'm going to kind of cede the floor right now and introduce our next speaker, a dear friend and colleague who I mentioned at the top, who was with me and Joelle at the beginning. And Marna Weston is, and many of you, he really needs no introduction. Marna was on that original team of oral historians who began doing oral history interviews that became part of that archive, the Joel Buchanan Archive of African American Oral Histories. Marna also led a number of our fieldwork projects to Mississippi, the Mississippi Delta. A lot of the voices in this archive are from, as I mentioned, from Gainesville, from Florida, but they're also from places like Elaine, Arkansas, Indianola, Mississippi, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So Marna Weston was there from the very beginning, helping us to get those oral history interviews. So without further delay, I'll turn it over to my dear friend and colleague, Marna Weston.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ortiz. Thanks, Paul. First and foremost, I want to take this moment to praise God for the blessings in my life and for each of us present and watching now and at all times for happiness and strength and how it's expressed in our respective and individual lives. I want to thank the elders whose sacrifices are illuminated and reflected in our work. And I also want to thank the students, families, and friends who offered trust and support to be able to tell these stories. Dr. Ortiz, Paul's been like a brother, a trusted colleague, a fellow oral historian, a travel companion, a mentor in education since 2008. And I want to also acknowledge Deborah Hendricks and Tamara Jenkins, who are like the sisters who weaved the technological and logistical support to make all this happen. Thank you all very much. How did I get involved in all of this, and how am I ended up having the honor to speak with you all today? The late labor historian at University of Florida, Dr. Robert Ziegler, insisted that I meet Paul Ortiz in late 2007, maybe early 2008, the author of Emancipation Portrayed. And I had found this book in the University of Florida Library, and I knew that I had to meet him. We had to get together, actually, as a Florida bookstore. We watched Pugh Hall being built, stood there at the dedication ceremony with Bob Graham and others, and we struck up a partnership that has deeply enriched both of our lives. And it's a partnership based on an appreciation of being welcomed as witnesses into the space where people and communities share who they are. It is a space of strength and vulnerability. And it's also a space in the kind of light that Margaret Block, who you saw in the opening, thought needed song. She always believed in singing something. So she like, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. In her poetry, she'd also say, vote or die at the end of that. But we sang that song together in the Mississippi Delta in Ruleville at Fannie Lou Hamer's grave for the first time that I went to the Delta with her. And then the other times we kept that same tradition, and we watched Fannie Lou Hamer's grave be invested with community support and continue to grow. These are the kind of spaces that Margaret led us to, and that Paul has been in partnership with me as we visited. And these are the spaces where we have to appreciate the personality, life, and work and professionalism of people like Margaret Block. But it's Joel Buchanan who we're talking about, his vision that we honor through the JBA, or Joel Buchanan Archives. Paul told you about his audacity and energy and authenticity to have the braveness to just say, let's go right up to Dr. Matchen's office. And the projects that began from there, the first, which Deborah and I went to in February of 2009 as a two-person crew, it was incredible. The president of the university had ordered every single senior member of the University of Florida to be at this meeting where we acknowledged the first Black graduate of every college on campus. And it was captivating because in some instances, there were people that we had no information on whatsoever. But Dr. Matchen was in Washington, and he made sure that every vice president, every dean, every senior official was there as we acknowledged with the families the contributions of those firsts, as we called them at the University of Florida. And the Joel Buchanan Archive is like that, from the seminal work that Joel did in the communities, here where he talked to teachers and preachers and business leaders and artisans and shopkeepers in their own voices to say that, the Black community has leaders. That's where the genius of this archive started. The JBA has been built almost like a quilt. I remember Jesse Jackson, talking about the quilt, not so long ago, the croaker sack, the old patches, the anecdotal family and community stories. These are the patches that intrigued us, and when stitched together, they captivated us. I think about my first trip to the Mississippi Delta, going to the airport grocery with Margaret Block, and going back to the Delta on my own for a solo trip a few years later. I think that was maybe 2011, and I went through Laurel, Mississippi. And Laurel's become really popular now because we see this home front story on television. But the story we remember from Laurel is that the activities of those who were against SNCC were so bad that SNCC had to leave town in order that the bombings would stop and that violence would discontinue. These are the kind of stories that people shared with us, and they were built on meeting people where they were. I think about trips to the Mississippi Delta, to the Arkansas Delta, to Southwest Mississippi, talking to former Black high school graduates, still thinking about the pain of segregation, having their high school careers ended and the teachers fired and principals, even without jobs anymore. Working with the University of Florida Black alumni, working with communities in East Gainesville like Porter's, in fact, all of Gainesville, doing oral history programs in High Springs, Florida, or in Bradford County through the Bradford County Library system, going to places like Peatsville and Lottie. These are little places on the map that you wouldn't even know when you rode through them. People remember Lottie now because Lottie and Stark and Waldo were once nationally noted for pulling people over and giving them tickets. And yet we took the time to go back to churches in Peatsville and Lottie and meet people who had, and this is going to sound really big to you because it sounded really big to us, talking to people who you're sitting next to them at this little church stay at 6 or 7 o'clock at night in Peatsville, and they tell you, oh yeah, I was in jail with King in St. Augustine. And 4 or 5 people begin to tell you the same story. These are the kind of stories that were revealed to us, whether it was in St. Augustine or whether it was through students taking my ENG 1001 modes of inquiry class or Paul's classes, students that came with us to the Mississippi Delta that were involved in leadership organizations like the North Star Leadership Council, the University Writing Program, the Progress and Aim program on campus, Black churches throughout the South, whether we went down to Melbourne, Florida, or whether we talked to individual clergy here, Black farmers in Monteoka Gordon community. The list goes on and on. All of these things started because we modeled Joel Buchanan's vision to be bold. And if stories that touch people's lives could be found in the Mississippi Delta, why could they not also be found in Florida, in Gainesville? Putting together interviewers for Paul's early classes when he joined us, I remember talking to Tom Cowart and Vivian Filer and all these local individuals who have incredibly powerful stories of sacrifice, of relatives and friends with horrific atrocities committed against them, and it was just seen as out of course. There was little that could be done about it. In the Black communities, people would know of these things, but outside of the individual families and those that witnessed these atrocities, these stories would not be told. So that patch, that quilt has been put together with the patches from all of those stories from this period of time. And I've been so honored to be a part of it and to be a part of Mr. Buchanan's vision. I'd like to, in closing of these remarks, thank also the people who were there with Paul at the very beginning, people like Dr. David Colburn, who wrote The African American History of Florida, Bonnie Burgess, who was the mayor of Alachua, Florida at that time, who worked with us after Paul and Joel and I got together. They became part of a brain trust as well to figure out how could we get students to get involved and do these interviews, because people, the elders, love telling their stories to young people. And now to find out that this program exists, that through artificial intelligence, we're going to be able to build curriculum for middle schools, for high schools. I can't tell you how excited I am about that as a former middle school teacher and now teaching world history and coaching the debate team, director of forensics at Santa Fe High School in Alachua. There are stories here in High Springs, Alachua, Bland, and North Florida that need to be told, and to be able to get that in an articulated spot so it can be relatively used is invaluable. And as Paul said, that's what the people asked us to do when we took the interviews. They trusted us that these interviews would be given to young people, that young people would learn the stories to be able to pass them on. It's quite an honor to continue to work with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program and to be able to make a brief presentation to all of you to talk about what this has meant to me. I look forward to the continuing work. So many faces here. I know, thanks Adolfo, thanks Deborah, Dr. Dupree, Dr. Gordon, and others. It's been an incredible journey. It continues. Deborah will continue to call me from time to time. We just came back from a program in Lake County where we had the honor of seeing the descendants of the Groveland Four as their relatives were completely exonerated from the horrible accusations that were made by Sheriff Willis McCall. And we'll continue to go back down there. And just thank you so much for the opportunity to just have a few words with you. It's my honor to pass on in the program the mic to Sandra Romero, and we'll be hearing comments from her at this time. And again, thank you so much.
Hi, so my name is Sandra Romero, and I have been with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program for almost 7 years now. I am currently one of the leading coordinators of the JBA, Joel Buchanan Archives Project. And currently I'm helping facilitate the process of moving all of these oral histories and interviews and transcripts to become accessible to be able to create these curriculums. So today I'm just going to go into a little bit about that process. I promise I won't talk your ear off on it too much, as exciting work as this is, but just to kind of understand a little of how integral the actual processing of of taking these oral histories. Like my colleague Marna Weston said, these are very rich historic accounts that they're practically like libraries of information that, had we not have conducted these interviews, could have been lost or perhaps never really brought up to light. So the transcription process, and not just the transcription, because that's like one facet of it, is a whole overarching process that I'm going to go over for a little bit, that really helps you guys understand just how much like legwork and footwork it is to get these from word to at the end as someone's school like desk or like as a curriculum, especially with these past few years of those efforts. So yeah. So as far as the SPOP as a whole, but specifically for the Joel Buchanan Archive, one of the jobs that I have been tasked with is to make sure that we help get most of these transcripts, if not all, but the complete collection, and continuing on from here onto our university archives. Now, we always, above all else, we do pride ourselves in the authenticity of the narrators' oral histories and their stories, because in the end, they are giving us their trust to be able to, like was said before, Dr. Ortiz had mentioned, where is to share this to the public. And now our biggest goal not only is to have this accessible or available, because prior to we always had these available, now is to make them accessible and in a practical manner. So it starts from conducting day one, when you outreach to the potential narrators or interviewees, we do our research. We really try to show how much that we understand and are sensitive to these different histories or topics that may come around. We do everything best to the interviewers or the interviewees' schedules and everything that works out best for them. And we try to really show how important that these oral histories are for future generations. And after the interview has been conducted, we have many processes through that we have shown how to teach people how to interview, which is always a wonderful experience, having new people come on in this program, learning and like from freshmen to even postgraduate, just experiencing this whole phenomenon of being able to go and learn all these histories had we not, done it before, things that you wouldn't find in a textbook. Ideally, with all this, maybe we will have textbooks in the future with these sources. But yeah, so after that, it does come then back to our job is to make sure to get it transcribed. And it's a 3-pronged process, like I've mentioned. I'll try to keep it brief, but it's transcription or drafting, audit editing, and final editing. Above all else, our goal is to make sure that authenticity and everything that is verbatim as per the agreements with our interviewees and our narrators. So anything that has been said according to what they wish will be put up there. So whether it be historical events, places, and people, like Marna has mentioned before, and Dr. Ortiz, where there are people who in interviews have mentioned that they may have known Dr. King or Zora Neale Hurston or Nikki Giovanni. We've had all these different, or even just bus boycott, all the different events that we have. And that's just in Florida, not including all amount, just how integral these information are. So with the drafting part, we ask those transcriptionists and those who are taking upon this to really give it a few listens and really try to, I don't want to say transcribe too many times, but basically to type down everything as accurately and authentically as possible. And then from there onwards, it goes down to our editors, which will then have a tuned eye, better ears, and perhaps more experience, be able to catch the little things that may or may have been missed by people in the drafting process. So then from there, in the auditing, we are always above all else trying to maintain that authenticity. And I know you're going to hear me say that above all else, but we don't edit our transcripts. We don't fix anything as far as like what's been said. And I think that's a really important thing to note, just because above all else, even like no matter what's been accounted, these are the perspectives of the individuals, and that's what's being on there. And on a day-to-day basis, even the people I work with are constantly telling me about different experiences they have and perspectives that they may have never of situations and events in the history of like Tallahassee bus boycott, civil rights movement, even after, where they get a whole new lens of it based on just being constantly in contact with these oral histories. So from then onwards is really just finishing the editing process. And then the big, most important part, I mean, all of them really are, but is to get them officially transferred to the UFDC, or also known as the University of Florida's library archives. And so to be able to have curriculums created and teachers being able to access this, we not only have to go through all those three processes I just mentioned of all the transcribing and editing, but then you have to also, with the wonderful work of Deborah and many other, I'm sure you're going to hear many shout outs to her. Like, it's been really integral in getting these transferred into the university, where they're and then available for future generations. It has been used, these sources have been used for dissertations. Wonderful examples of all of these sources that, that are practical use. We've had plays, if anyone remembers Gator Tales, those are sources. That's one of the many mediums that can be used with these sources. And now it's like Mara says, I'm also very excited to be able to have these used for future generation as far as the education and realm of academia, because honestly, history is written by those who have the pen in a sense. And in this way, we have so many different sources to be able to provide a whole new perspective, firsthand accounts of people who not only lived during these times, but even those who watched others live or been affected therefore after, and just provide a whole scope overall. And I think that's one of the most exciting things ever, to be able to watch this this collection overall grow. Like Dr. Ortiz said, I can definitely testify over 1,000 interviews like in this one alone, this one project, and that has multiple it's an umbrella project in a sense, has multiple different side projects, and to have these available and usable above all else, I think is an amazing thing for us to be doing here. And I'm proud to be able to help with that. So after that, it's really, that's the whole process, is starting from it really starts from a connection or an interest or curiosity. I know I always will bring Marna Weston into this, because he's kind of the reason why I got into interviewing when I first came into SPOP almost 7 years ago. Basically hearing how he interviewed the individuals and how people respond to just that curiosity and that authentic care. It really did change a lot of perspectives. And so, I just think that it's an amazing thing that's going on with that processing. And I'm really sorry I can't make the transcription process and everything sound much more exciting than my colleagues. I'm sure it probably could, but it's amazing work, and you may not see it all the time. Like, it's one of them, I like to say the worker ants in a sense, but it's this work is definitely, I think, gonna create a whole new generation of knowledge and fresh perspectives on past historical events that even like mine, and I graduated a few years ago, may not have had. But without further ado, I would like to now present, okay, there we go. My next co-worker speaker, Dr. Kevin Tang.
Yes, so it's a real honor to be able to share with you the original ideas of developing this project and how we ultimately applied for a grant with the National Endowment for the Humanities and successfully got the grant to be able to execute this amazing project. So it all started with my ex-graduate student, Joshua Martin. He was very much interested in looking in biases in existing language technologies, or language technologies such as your smartphone automatic speech recognition when you talk to Alexa or Siri, and how they are inherently biased against speakers of African-American language. But at the time, there weren't any kind of suitable supervisors around the Department of Linguistics. And so he approached me and said, hey, Dr. Tam, I'm really excited that you're coming to UF to join us as a new assistant professor in computational language science. And so as soon as I arrived, we immediately started talking about how we can develop a project and develop his dissertation further. And one of the first things that we identify is that there's simply there isn't that much authentic data out there, kind of very much like how the previous speaker is talking authenticity. And that is very true. There's simply a lack of authentic speech or language data created by African Americans and really honor the language and the content. And so to that end, we decided to source locally. We talked to many people, and Josh ultimately spoke with a few different members of the Samuel Proctor Oral History programs and put me in touch with Dr. Ortiz. And we basically had a conversation. And later on, we also got in touch with Stephanie Birch, the then subject librarian of African American Studies, with the libraries. And we have a big discussion about how we can really increase the accessibility of so many of these wonderful, authentic oral histories, interviews with African Americans. And ultimately, we decided to create the proposal to be able to do this. And starting with only 500, but there's plenty more of interviews of the African Americans in the Gulf South, a population that is traditionally absent from many other oral history collections, and how we can unleash them. So the initial idea basically literally looks like this. We quickly hire some programmers and to help us sketch out what we want in the very initial prototype of an accessible interface. Because while these oral history interviews are indeed available, you can find them on the library's archive. You will see that there is a search engine. You can search for terms and you will search the transcripts, and you will find one, maybe half an hour to 2 hour oral history sound file, and you'll find one PDF file containing the full transcript, very, very faithfully transcribed, but they're not connected, they don't talk to each other. So you have to listen to the oral history in its entirety, which you should always, and also read or print out this PDF file, which is not the most accessible way of viewing this content, especially not for actual users who would like to use them, for example, in education in the classroom, or even by linguists for research. So to that end, we decided to build an interface where everything is time aligned. So you can search for a particular word or phrase or key terms, and it will automatically direct you to the sentences or paragraph or speaker terms that contains those words of a given oral history. And as you view the audio, you'll be able to see exactly what is being spoken. Next. And so that took us into the journey of trying to get money. So we started with getting some money from the UF Humanities Scholarship Enhancement Fund. We were not successful. The reviewers said, well, this is such a worthwhile project. We really believe that it can attract external funding. However, it lacks scholarship in the humanities sense. And that's really encouraging and also give us a sense of how to do this better. And with the encouragement by my then department chair, Eric Postam, it led us to really put in the humanities, put in the scholarship by adding a focus in education, oral history, linguistics, all the while enabled with artificial intelligence technologies. And we developed a grant proposal with the support of the grants manager, Ben Faber from the University Library. We identified NEH as the grant funding agencies. Then we have regular meetings to develop the idea together as a larger team with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, the libraries, with linguistics, with education experts. And we submitted in July 2020 and got the award a number of months later. And we were so excited to be able to start this project. And it actually opened up a number of opportunities already, even within 6 months since we have 6 to 8 months since we have started. I then got a 10-year professorship in Germany. And there was a new hire, Dr. Sandra Romero, which you will hear from her in a second, who got hired under the artificial initiative of the University of Florida. And our initial graduate student, Joshua Martin, earned his PhD on this very topic. And because of this grant, we actually got more students coming to UF. We have a new graduate student, Alex Davis, which you'll hear from her in a second as well. There's a strong interest in using this database, using this resource that we're developing to address questions in sociophonetics and African-American language. And this really brought us together to have a very complementary set of expertise in sounds and grammars, in building technology, natural language processing tools for minority languages, in having native speakers' knowledge of African-American language, and altogether integrating artificial intelligence and African-American language in computational linguistics courses held here at UF and also in my current institute in Germany. And I'm very excited to be able to pass on the baton to Professor Muller, who's going to introduce our computational linguistics team, which consists of Alexis Davis, Bill Dye, our current graduate students, and how we're continuing to increase our level of mentorship by having more undergraduate trainees and graduate trainees here at UF. Thank you. Dr. Muller, is all yours.
All right, thank you very much. So what I want to do is give you a little bit of a peek under the hood in the application of artificial intelligence technology on these African-American oral histories. And you can see from the overview here, it's pretty complicated. There's a lot of moving parts, so I won't give into all the details, but I'll try to give you a picture of some of the exciting stuff that we can do with the technology that's out there. So it starts with, at the top there, just us gaining a better understanding. We're working with these recorded speech and we're working with the transcriptions of them in separate files and separate documents. And because we're working with English, which has been used more than any other language to develop artificial intelligence, which, you know, in a sense, we could just say it comes down to artificial intelligence kind of comes down to understanding what humans mean, what they're saying. So it's linguistics. English has been developed in that research more than any other. So we have these tools that are developed that have learned on English data, which we can plug in to annotate these oral histories and get information automatically from them, which then we can take that output and kind of plug it into this interactive interface for the educators and for the benefit of the community and for the benefit of further research in these areas. Let's go to the next slide, and I'll just talk about some of these things that we're doing. So one thing that we can plug in is an automatic time alignment between the text and the speech, because the transcriptions and the speech are separate. There's a tool, or there's tools that we can use to automatically detect what part of the written text matches with the representation of the sound waves. So that's the time alignment. And you can imagine that's really helpful when you want to, when you found something in the transcription that you want to build a class around or to discuss or learn more about, you can search through the written, which is easier, and get that connection directly to the person actually talking the words that you're seeing. So that's one thing. Let's go to the next thing that we do on the next slide. These are, so we can do automatic part of speech tagging, which seems like a fairly simple thing to do, except when you put words into a sentence, things get complicated. And it is actually fairly low level for linguistics, but it builds on, it provides some basic information, which we can build on then to help us use for other models that help us understand the meaning and the to answer questions automatically and do summarization of the content. So it's a basic low level application of artificial intelligence on these texts that we can use to build bigger and more complicated systems. Another thing that we can apply is called, so we can go back to the previous slide, is named entity recognition. There you go, on the bottom there, which is very similar to part of speech tagging, but it's not just recognizing, for example, that this word is a proper noun, but that this word represents a person and this phrase represents a country or organization, or this is a date. And this can be, you can imagine, useful as we're trying to get a better understanding of the content of these oral histories, these hundreds, thousands of oral histories, of what's in there and what's being talked about. So, and by the way, all of these models aren't just marking up single texts and then we're done. These are generalizable. So as we bring in more oral histories, these can be applied to new oral histories and be generalized to any new one. So it can find then, for example, oh, this person is talking about an organization, which we can then, with a little bit of information about the history and in the content and the local community, perhaps recognize that, oh, they're talking about a church or a community organization that's had some influence on the community, or here's a date that they've mentioned, which we know is historically relevant. So we can explore that further to find out what maybe they're talking about in their personal life that corresponds to a historical event that's bigger in nature. And then the next slide, another thing we can do to get a better understanding of the content of these oral histories is apply what we call topic modeling. And this is an algorithm, it's a clustering algorithm. Essentially, it's finding keywords in the text that are occurring together, and it's kind of proposing that these are topics. So it's recognizing that these are topics that people are talking about based on the words that are in the text. And this application, this AI model actually requires interpretation from humans afterwards. So it kind of clusters the words together, as you can see there. And then it requires somebody who knows about the content in the context to give some interpretation. So you can see the first topic that it was found in these oral histories on this pilot project from the word student, Florida University, Black, college, UF experience program, that we have a lot of people talking about their experiences as university students. And then in topic 31, with those words there, train, Black, job, war, military, service, army, that we have people talking about their experiences as African Americans in the military service. So these are all models that we can apply and get out information. Next slide. But I'm afraid I may have misled you a little bit, because I kind of give this implication that we can just plug it in. We have these well-developed models for English. We can plug it in and get out this information and just then plug it into our applications. But it's actually not, unfortunately, that simple, or perhaps fortunately for my job security, it's not that simple, because a lot of these models are very dependent. All of these models, except for that last one I showed you, and a lot of the other ones we used, are very dependent on the data that was given to them to learn from. It's called the training data, and the characteristics and features in that data. And so if they're not representative of the language of the data that we're trying to apply the models to, then the results are not going to be very useful. And it's a well-known problem that a lot of these AI technologies, the data that are being used to build them, there just is not a good representation of African American ways of speaking. And so our job actually is more than just to plug these models and get the useful information. What we need to do is refine these models and work with the data. A lot of what we're doing is applying these models and then figuring out why in the world aren't we getting the results that we would expect, and what is the cause of these issues. How do we deal with them? And then how do we re-engineer the data, or re-engineer the models, or bring in other techniques to get better results for the results that we need from the African American oral histories. And this is where the UF is really able to make contribution, and is already making contributions to this field. So there's an example of a couple of papers that have been accepted or published already, just focusing on one unique feature of African American English, which is the habitual B. And how we are going, hopefully, and we are hoping to get even better at identifying that occurrence of that feature with the automatic models. And there's a lot more here. So there's a lot of features here we could look at, and I'm going to pass it on to Alexis Davis, who's one of our excellent linguistics graduate students, to just give you a small taste of the unique features of African American language and why this is such a challenge for us. So Alexis, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Lawrence, much. Good afternoon, everybody. Right now, we're going to get into what makes African American language. Exactly how do African Americans speak? And then what kind of features are present in these interviews that we have under the Joe Buchanan Archive. So this first feature is discussing the absence of the third person S. So if we think of English, for example, The way that we change verbs depends on who we're talking about, right? We'll say something like I walk and then he walks, but it's still you walk and we walk, right? So that S that we have in he walks and she walks and it walks, in African American language, you don't actually see that S appear too often. So in this first example that we have here at the top, if you could go ahead and play the audio for me, we have the removal of the S from the verb does, and instead it sounds more like do.
Person do something here, they almost able to catch them.
Perfect, thank you. So in this example, which is actually coming straight from an interview within the archive, the speaker doesn't say a person does something, they almost able to catch them. They say a person do something, they almost able to catch them. And we want to make sure that when we're looking at these interviews and that when we're using this data in order to train our models, we are actually being as accurate as possible when it comes to how people are speaking. Other examples of this feature, or rather the lack of this feature, can be found in sentences like she played too much and it don't look funny to you. Those are instances where we just won't see the S, and that is a true feature of African American language. We go into the second one, please. This is one of the features that Dr. Muller was just talking about with us, habitual be. And habitual be is used when you're talking about a situation that happens constantly or consistently, and it's happened enough times before that you don't have to say usually in a sentence, you can say it be happening. So in this example that we have here at the top, you can go ahead and play the audio for this one, Adolfo, then I'll explain it.
I didn't know him personally, but I know he was black. I was in always be in the paper.
And right at the very end there, we can hear the speaker. This is also an example coming from our archive. She says whatever she's referring to, maybe it's an incident or as an event or situation, it always be in the paper, which means whatever is occurring, it's always being talked about. And so that little B that you see there is a feature of African American language, and you can also see it in contexts such as the other two sentences that I've included. I be chilled till my boss shows up. That means in general, I'm cool, I'm fine. But once my boss shows up, then I get tense again. And in that third sentence that I have there, you do be acting up sometimes. You can actually use do to kind of emphasize that this is something that really does happen quite frequently for you. So you can use do and be in tandem. Let's go on to the third feature that we can find. Thank you. So in this third feature, this is called remote past been. And I've included more of a formal definition of this feature because it can be a little bit difficult to explain in terms of linguistic features. However, if I were to explain it more in general terms, I could say that it's it's a marker used to refer to a situation that is definitely in the past, it's already over, and you're talking to someone who should also have knowledge that this event, this situation has already occurred and is completely done with. There's an element of exasperation when people use been when they're speaking. So in this first example here, you can go ahead and press the audio. We'll see what I'm talking about.
He been asked about me, but I was in Cleveland, Mississippi to a women's convention.
Perfect. Thank you. So in this sentence here, again, coming from our archives, the speaker says he been asked about me. So whoever the he is in this scenario, this person speaking has the understanding that the listener also knows who he is and should kind of already know in some instances that whatever was asked about had already been asked about. So in these example sentences that we see here, like I've been cleaned up the kitchen, you could imagine maybe a husband saying that to his wife, like I've been cleaned up the kitchen. If you had gone in there, you would have seen that the kitchen was clean. There's this element of exasperation and a tiny little bit of frustration. Sometimes it's not necessarily malicious or like frustrated intent, but it can also just be a, how did you not know that, you know? And this third example here, we been left her little baby shower. It could be more neutral. It's just, this is something that happened and we're done with it and we moved on. Or it could also be something more like, we've been left her little baby shower and it was not lit at all. So there are some features that have more emotional content to them. And the features of African American language, they're not necessarily just conveying different grammatical and then more objective observations about a setting. Sometimes they're allowing for more creativity and subjectivity in how people talk about these ideas. And our final feature that we'll be talking about, please. Perfect, thank you. So multiple negators in African American language, this is actually quite a commonly heard feature, and it's not necessarily just exclusive to African American language. A lot of people use multiple negators, especially in the Southern United States. The features that we've been talking about today are just a snapshot of the annotated features that we are looking at as the linguist team. And it can be really helpful for us when we're looking at text processing and how to better train our models when we make sure that we allow our models to know that there's more than one way to say things. So we have two examples of multiple negators here. And Adolfo, I would like for you to play both of them in line, please.
And I didn't like it because I ain't never had nobody do me like that.
Perfect.
You know, record profit time and time again, and then they don't want to pay the employee nothing.
Perfect, thank you. So multiple negators in African American language, just because they exist doesn't necessarily mean that people who speak African American language can't just use one way to negate in a sentence. But when you use more of them, it feels like there's a bit more of an emphasis that this thing did not occur. So in this first sentence that we had here from the archives, I never had nobody do me like that. And if you are paying attention to my presentation, you would notice that the speaker also dropped the S off of does there. And that's why it says nobody do me like that. So you can use more than just one negator. You can use 3 negators. And I see some examples in the chat talking about been here. And that first example, I've been know that by E. Stanley Richardson, perfect. That is exactly what we are looking at. And that's what we need our models to be able to pick up and to understand, not as broken English, but as a legitimate language variety that African Americans speak. And for the second one, Marna here that we have here, you always been on point. That is where linguists such as myself are actually having trouble figuring out if the been that we use is always remote past been, or it's the same been that we actually end up seeing in other varieties of English. We kind of go back and forth as to what these lines look like. But as soon as you hear something in African American language, you just know exactly what it means. So I really like that example there. Thank you for being interactive with me. And finally, for our last example for multiple negators, we have she never asked him nothing. So again, it's more emphatic. The richness of African American language goes beyond just like the words that we say. It's also how we say these things. And the archive is a great window into the vibrancy of African American speech communications. So now I'm going to pass it on to Rebecca Cordova so that we can get some more information on how this African American language can be tied into the curriculum that our teachers and educators can use. Thank you.
Thanks, Alexis. Welcome, everybody. It's so wonderful to have you all here and learn a bit about our wonderful work together. I'm Rebecca Cordova, and I'm the education director for this particular project. My work is to create, co-create, design, build relationships with people so that we can shift the instruction in K through 12 classrooms and educational community centers so that all of these primary resources, as well as the pedagogies and dispositions of teachers can be shifted so that localized histories can really be privileged above, other types of ways of talking about the histories of the Gulf South. So first, I want to just mention that this work has been in discussion for a very long time. And one of the ways we first attempted to feel out how this might work was in our pilot project in 2020. And that is when we worked with 5 school districts and 8 teachers in North Florida. And what we asked them to do was to explore the oral history collections, specifically the Joel Buchanan collection. And we asked them to, hey, take a look at all of these primary resources, give us feedback about the portal that's available, and create curriculum specifically for Black History Month in 2020. And the teachers that we worked with were ecstatic to be able to have these resources. They didn't really even know that they existed, that UF had held them in an archive, and that they were just available. And so we worked with these teachers to create specific lesson plans for their history program in their curriculum. And we had elementary school teachers, we had middle school teachers, and we had high school teachers. And the curriculum that they created was just phenomenal. Specifically, we had a chemistry teacher in Duval County who created some curriculum and really stretched the imagination of, how can he take these primary resources of oral histories and create a curriculum in chemistry. We were really able to see the depth and breadth that these resources the way in which they could impact the classroom was phenomenal. So we asked the teachers after they were done to give us feedback on, how could this work if we were to roll out a larger project? Next slide, please. When they gave us feedback, they said a few things. One was that, again, they didn't know that these even existed. So they were thrilled to know that their, local amazing university just down the road held such amazing archives. So they thought, these are great. They're excellent resources for curriculum creation. They're excellent supplementary resources for students. We're thrilled. They also said the primary way in which they felt they were the most powerful was to bring localized history into the classroom. So many of the textbooks are general. They're not even regional specific. And so to be able to bring something to the table for young people where they could actually see somebody either from their small town or their neighborhood in a bigger city just felt like that was an engagement level that they hadn't really experienced before. They did give us some challenging feedback in terms of how to make it better for educators. One was that the current portal was kind of challenging to search for specific topics, right? They could search for names and they could search for cities. Sometimes the themes would work, but for their purposes, finding topics and knowing for sure that the oral histories would address their topic wasn't always as smooth as they wished they were. The portal, they felt like, could benefit from some additional educational supports for teachers, right? Like, not only did they want the resources to be there, they also thought if we could offer some ideas for how to use the resources, it would help inspire their own creative thinking. And then they also said what they really, really wanted was for this portal to not just be educator friendly, but student friendly, right? Because they saw this as, hey, if we're in a place we really want students to do research too, this needs to be hospitable to them and so that they can do their own searching, right? So this was kind of the main feedback we received, which fit in perfectly to where I feel like as educators who care about African-American history in the classroom, especially in Florida, we know that there's a need, right? We know that at the most basic, there's the Florida's 1993 statute that requires the teaching of African-American history. However, there's been several studies done, and few districts actually comply necessarily. They will all say that they do something, but in terms of having a rich and robust curriculum or scope and sequence, few districts do that work well. And there really aren't any measures or consequences for not doing it very well. The requirements can be vague, and there's not a ton of support at the local district levels across the state. It's pretty diverse based off of how invested the district is in providing African-American history for students, even though it is required. The North Florida regions, Northwest Florida and Northeast Florida, actually show the fewest options for professional development related to African American history for teachers. In that the districts themselves in North Florida offer almost none, whereas in Central Florida and South Florida, there are more opportunities. So North Florida is an opportune place for us to continue to do this work. And in addition to just not a lot of PD for African American history, there is the least amount of knowledge, content knowledge of African American language amongst teachers, in that there's almost no professional development on African American language available. And then finally, there are a few textbooks that highlight localized history or showcase the nuanced differences among African American histories in the South. They're very essentialist, they very generalize about what it means to be African American in the South. It's kind of a one look thing. And whereas this project offers a lot of opportunity to say, hey, living in the Panhandle, living in Jacksonville, living in Gainesville, living in the rural areas, agricultural areas, these are all very different, right? They're not the same. So these localized histories can really make the difference in students engaging in their communities and in content, which is, of course, something history teachers are very excited about. Next slide, please. So just in terms of what our project is currently in the mix of, we will create over 100 pieces of curriculum for K through 12 classrooms and community education center, with a focus on localized history curriculum, but that also can get blown out to, like, you know, the patterns and the trends of the Gulf South. And we are working particularly diligently to align them with state and national standards to serve students and educators across the country, which we know is of the utmost importance, especially as history and civics standards shift, as politics in states shift. We want to make sure that we have authentic, quality, powerful pieces of curriculum that also are able to be used with all of the faith and the confidence that teachers need in order to move this work out into the classroom. Next slide, please. So, like I said, our general themes focus on Black history in the Gulf South. We're primarily focused on Florida, Georgia, Mississippi, although we have other areas as well. We even are creating a couple new projects in order to, you know, we've identified some gaps where we're thinking, you know, if we really want to paint a great picture curriculum-wise of the Gulf South, you know, there may be some places where we haven't done the work that we should and could do. So we're doing both, using our current archives, which are plentiful, and then also identifying places where, hey, this is a space where I see some possibilities. The lenses that we are using, with the great help of our advisory board, are the following in terms of how do we want to see this curriculum being positioned in the classroom and in people's lives. We want to make sure that we talk about justice and joy, healing, resistance, power, faith, family and community, liberation. We want to make sure that the lenses that we use are dynamic and responding to basically trying to capture the most human experience that we can. Our current focus on curriculum are these three topics: the Black church, civil rights portraits of individual people across the Gulf South, and Black schooling in Florida. And the reason why we've chosen these particular three has a lot to do with not only some of the standards shifts we've seen in Florida that we're responding to, and then simultaneously we are looking at, you know, where are we seeing those topics themed out through the linguistics team work, right? They are showing us not only do we have these rich oral histories, but here are the themes that are really present in these histories that'll also help us talk about African American language in addition to history. So last slide, our big project goals are to really also help work with teachers, because I think if you know education and you know teaching, you know that you can't just hand a lesson plan to anyone and say, just teach this, right? There's more to it than that. And we want to be able to, at the same time we offer curriculum, we feel like it's our responsibility as a university to say, and here is some professional development that we can help you with that will not only help with understanding the content, but also question yourself as an educator. Are you ready to teach these types of topics? Do you know enough? Have you created the type of classroom community or culture in order to have these kinds of conversations with students? We take it really seriously, so we want to make sure we offer it as well. So content workshops and self-paced sessions that teachers can go through. In addition, primary resource support. A lot of teachers aren't used to working with primary resources, and so they need some support in order to actually, how do you use them in in ways that are powerful when a lot of teachers are used to just using textbooks that have already done that work for them. And then what are the opportunities for community learning, right? Teachers don't live in isolation. They are part of the communities. Schools are part of communities. Students live in communities. There's caregivers. And so what are some other ways that we can do this work inside communities so that students can learn alongside educators? So the current teacher professional development / student curriculum modules we're working on right now, which we think are foundational to this work, is what is African American language? And what is oral history? And what does it mean for learning? Because if teachers don't have this, then our other pieces of curriculum will be not as on solid foundation. So we want to make sure that we are offering some of these basic foundational pieces so that we can dive in further with teachers, and then we can say, hey, and here's how you can really make a difference in your classroom by using these primary resources. I think that's my last slide. So I will, with all of that said, I will pass it to Dr. Jake Gordon and Ms. Sherry Dupree to do closing remarks.
I just want to congratulate the Samuel Proctor Oral History Project. This is a very, very significant program. You've taken us from 19th, 20th century into the 21st, 22nd century, 23rd century. I recall very well when Joseph Allen Nevins began oral history in 1948 at Columbia. People said there was no such thing like oral history. But we have been able to, you have been able to move this forward from that period. It was not until 1966 that we actually have an oral history association in this country. Western historiography did not want to recognize oral history. So I'm very grateful that you have brought it forward to us. You have also created a community archive that's accessible not only to scholars of the campus. So when I think about community, I think beyond just people who are not in the university. University is a part of the community. The public schools we are working with is a part of the community. There are other sectors of the community that we also need to reach with this great idea. When Nevin started, he was writing shorthands. He took oral history with shorthand. Now you are talking about artificial intelligence. This is revolutionary. Congratulations. And so what is the significance of this to the community? I think we are on the right track. Working with the school district, those of us who work with the school district for many years in the African American History Task Force, we know that something is missing. There's a gap. And that gap is actually local history. And you are filling that gap with this project. And I know that we are going to be very happy when it's all done. Maybe it's going to be just ongoing. There is no history without oral tradition. The beginning of human history is oral. And what you're doing is to let people know that to understand the human experience, you have to go beyond some written documents into the real people, their lives, how they spend their life. So this is really a big plus. This is a very big thing for me, that you have taken oral history to a different level entirely. My hope is that you're going to go beyond K-12 into our cultural institutions in the community, into archival material. This is a community archive that we need to share with the entire community, whether it's within the university or the public school or cultural institutions. And so I say thank you for a job well done. Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you my dear friend, Sherry Dupree.
All right, very good. Thank you so much, Dr. Gordon. In fact, you've covered several of the points that I had written down, but this is great because we're on the same page of dealing with some of the same types of issues. My concern is that this organization is going to be covering primary resources, and this is key to learning now. The Library of Congress has put forth a special effort to put out primary resources in all subject areas. And now they are allowing us to do what we call critical learning skills in the various subject areas. And it's easy to do with the primary resources. So you're working toward making that global, not just for Florida, but for other areas as well. I love the idea of having teachers involved. You cannot do anything without the teachers. And I love also you sharing the learning styles and teaching methods with them, because they have no knowledge of how to teach oral history and local history. Many of these teachers are from out of state or from other places. So they need to be given an opportunity to share the local history as well as other histories. Another point that I wanted to bring out was the use of the textbooks. Yes, the textbooks have been extremely general. So to have things come in a local format and in a format where the public can accept it is wonderful. Another aspect that I see is allowing this information in the public libraries. Yes, it's going to be fine at the universities, but it has to be in the public libraries where everyone can reach it. The common person can reach it. You can go there and see and read and learn. And this has already been done at the University of Southern Cal. Southern California is already in the process of doing that now, putting a lot of their work on the public screen, and it's going into public units so that it can be shared. And I'm sure this material will do the same thing. It will allow the general person to go into the library and listen to those interviews, listen to what they mean, see curriculums that they can apply to local activities, such as to your local churches, to your Boy Scout groups, your Girl Scout groups, and to other activities in the community. This is a wonderful way to bring the university groups and the community groups together. It will also help in your local government, because many times they need something quickly, and they can go there and say, oh, let's go to this archive and see what Joel Buchanan has saved. And when I say Joel Buchanan, I'm talking about all the many people who put information there for us. And this is a way of bridging the gap between academia and the general public. The layman is going to love what you are doing because they can relate to this. The parents will be able to relate to this. We have left them out so many times when we're doing research. But now they can go online, they will be able to see and be able to understand some of the things that are important to learning. Retention is always important. And you're going to have many stories that are coming forth now that haven't come forth because they see a need for the story to come forth. They will see how this story is going to be used to help others to understand. And we're reaching for our youth, yes, but we're also reaching to educate everyone. Learning is a continuous process, especially with our senior citizens, because they want to be included in whatever is being done. So I thank you all for all that you are doing. This is outstanding, and I believe it's going to make a major change in society. Plus, it's going to be able to be translated into different languages. And that is so important. So if I speak Spanish, I can come right in and click this thing into Spanish and follow the information that we need to share knowledge. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Sherry Dupree, and thank you all to all the panelists for being here today. Right now, we're moving towards the Q&A section portion of the webinar. So with that said, I will leave you with a couple of questions, maybe from one of the attendees that ask a question. How can we integrate and get the curriculum of oral histories to students that may not be in Gainesville? So possibly from another state, in the Gulf South or other areas? Can somebody answer that question?
Well, may I make a comment? The public library system, I'm in libraries, is working toward doing just that, to bring this same type of information and put it into the national network, what we call the World Network. So it will be available all over in all states. So you're right on target.
All right, great answer. The next question, will you be able to include or take into account the variations of African language by regions throughout the United States?
I'll take that one on, or at least start. We would love to. It's something we've talked about. It would be great. And hi, Dwayne, by the way, so glad you could make it. To take in accounts and have a better understanding of how African Americans speak in different communities, in different states. That's something we expect to see with language as a variation. However, we need a lot of data, probably a lot more than we have. Most of these oral histories are focused in this part, which there's room to explore, certainly, in the Gulf South. Another thing is we need metadata. So we need information about the speakers. So where were they born? Where did they grow up? What other languages or varieties did they encounter? And I think I like this question too, because I think it brings into focus the advantages of having a cross-disciplinary team. So one of the things I've been learning working with oral historians, not having been trained in it, is how they get people to talk and to talk naturally and to give stories. Because I typically work, my research focuses on endangered languages. So communities and ways of speaking that are, they're, just elderly speakers. It's the only one that speak it, and that language has no record, and they're in danger of just, that language is gone without any record of it. So one thing we want to do, as we try to do as linguists, is to go in and get them to talk, to speak the language, so we have that record. So I've been learning some things with this interaction. And I think the flip side also, that hopefully what we can contribute to for oral historians so that they can help make a contribution is actually in this area, because we talked about it and we're like, well, of course we'll have this data about who spoke what, when, and what was their mother speaking and their father speaking, thinking like linguists, and realizing that isn't necessarily information that oral historians are thinking about. So hopefully that's something we can contribute to oral history of these different varieties in different languages. Is here's some information that if you want to contribute to a better understanding of the way that people speak and express themselves, this information can be really helpful. And that would be so exciting to do, to expand this to other varieties and get more refined learning from it about the languages.
Yeah, to echo what Dr. Muller was saying, one of the wonderful things about the Joel Buchanan Archive of African American Oral History is that we have been able to do oral history interviews throughout the Gulf South, and then, as Adolfo and Marna mentioned earlier, kind of up and down the Mississippi Delta, down to Natchez, of course, the home place of the great author Richard Wright. We've actually been working with his daughter, Julia Wright, who rediscovered his magnificent novel, The Man Who Lived Underground. That took us to Elaine, Arkansas. And we've been doing oral history fieldwork in Elaine, Arkansas. We were invited by the community to help them commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Elaine Massacre in 2019. And that work is ongoing. And that work has kind of led in what some scholars call a daisy chain method to other parts of both the Arkansas Delta down into Louisiana. And also, we have a lot of former students, alumni now, who are doing their own oral history projects in different parts of the country. So I can imagine our scope and scale just getting larger and larger and larger. We do have to say that the global pandemic did put kind of a temporary halt to our field work, and so that slowed things down, but we're beginning to kind of reboot. And so this summer, the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, we're getting back into the fieldwork business. And so we'll be back into different parts, going down to South Florida, the Panhandle, into Alabama, and different parts of the country to do more oral history interviews. But this time, we're going to be greatly enriched by the insights from Dr. Tang, Dr. Moeller, and our colleagues in linguistics, who are helping us become a little more attuned to these regional variations. Our fieldwork is going to be much more enriched by Dr. Rebecca Cordova, who's been challenging us to think about how do we do oral history interviews that at the outset are going to be more classroom ready. Because if it is true that our narrators, many of them 85, 90 years and older, want their voices shared with youth, then what better way than to think about, hey, let's get this into a high school or middle school classroom. But again, we're not trained as oral historians to think that way. And so Rebecca Cordova, Sarah Mueller, Kevin Tang, and their team have really helped us kind of fine tune the oral history, the beginning of that oral history project, I think that Sandra Romero talked about, the research part, even before we get out into the field.
Okay, with that said, we have a couple more questions. One individual, which I think it's something for us to discuss. Are you aware of any other history collections that are similarly using AI? This sounds like a very unique project. Are any other universities doing AI and integrating oral history?
I'll get this one. As far as we know, there are certainly other oral history projects going through a similar kind of digital revolution, so to speak, right? With interfaces that are a lot more, that increase accessibility. But from the ones that we have surveyed, and we surveyed quite a lot for this project, a vast majority of them are very much like kind of similar to the existing state of the Joe archive, one file, one transcript, and some of them has some search interfaces that are slightly better with like time alignment, but at the sentence level, but nothing as sophisticated as what we are doing and planning to do with time alignment at all the way to the segment or sound level, and enrich with topic search, fuzzy searches, and even sentiment, emotional recognition. As far as we know, that does not exist. There's similar projects in forgotten the exact university now. I think it's called the Black Book Project, where they look at newspapers and articles and books, and primarily text-based, but not spoken speech. So yes and no.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that answer. Another question that we have this AI program have to be approved by the University of Florida Department of Education, the legislature, and the governor of Florida for grade levels mentioned grade school, middle school, and high school and second? Will you be getting into teaching CRT, critical race theory, history with the oral histories? Would that be a possibility, or how will you go about that?
I can attempt to answer this. I'm going to read it back myself so I make sure I understand. Have this AI program have to be approved by the Florida Department of Education, the legislature, and the governor of Florida for the grade levels mentioned, grade school, middle school, and high school? And second, will you be getting into teaching CRT, critical race history with the oral histories? Okay, so no, this is a this project is a research project that is funded by the NEH and has been approved by the University of Florida with many outcomes and outputs, right? With the hope that basically these oral histories and the themes that are apparent in these oral histories and captured in the oral histories will be supportive for teachers in the classroom to bring history and civics alive, right? There are, if you take a look at the they were revised, right? So Florida's social studies standards were just revised, making the civics one of the largest components. There's still history standards, there's still government standards, but the civics part significantly got advanced, right? So if you look at the Florida civic standards currently, they still are very clearly interested in addressing a nuanced look at Florida history, right? Nuanced look at the governmental institutions of Florida's history. They have significant, especially in fourth grade, look at Indigenous communities and the ways in which Indigenous communities interacted with other types of communities in Florida. So in terms of needing any type of approval, there is no approval necessary because the state releases and creates standards, and then the curriculum that is created then gets aligned with those standards, as well as other national standards like the National Association for Social Studies Teachers or the National Association for English Teachers, right? So we combine not just Florida state standards, because we want this support to be, it's not just the history of Florida, this is the Gulf South. So we want other states to be able to see themselves in this work. And that means we have to attend to other standards across the Gulf South. And that includes national standards of our profession. In terms of CRT, critical race history, you know, I'm not really sure specifically what you're asking, but what I will say is that what teachers will be able to do with the curriculum that we create is basically decide what is the best way to engage young people and community members in their own localized history, right? So when we're thinking about how do we talk about the history of Gainesville or the history of Putnam County or the history of Jacksonville, we will now be able to support teachers and say, hey, here are some curriculum pieces that directly connect to a neighborhood in Jacksonville that might really engage some of your students so that they can feel at home in what they're learning about. So what we're offering is an opportunity for teachers to support students in seeing themselves in curriculum, but not just themselves, but the people that may have come before them, generations of people that have come before them in their community, the histories of how their communities have been built. And the civic standards in Florida currently absolutely support a high level of student engagement around understanding governmental institutions, the founding and creation of cities and towns. So all of that is well supported by the state.
Yeah, and if I could just, dovetail on what Rebecca is saying, it's important to remember that the state of Florida has a number of educational requirements and rules and mandates that we alluded to earlier. One, and the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, we typically give educational teachers workshops throughout the state on these several different mandates. So for example, every school district in the state of Florida is required to teach African American history. Every school district in the state of Florida is required to teach Holocaust history. Every district is required to teach a component about World War II. Most recently, 2 years ago, the state of Florida made it a rule. Every school district must teach about the origins and the outcomes of the Ocoee Election Day massacre in the state of Florida. So one of the many reasons I'm so excited about this research endeavor is that this research endeavor is going to make it easier for us in higher ed to be able to make our research materials useful to the 67 school districts in the state of Florida, many of which, as Rebecca can tell you and Sherry Dupree can tell you, are just starving for this content. They need this content so badly because our teachers, we have wonderful teachers in the state of Florida, but frankly, they don't go to even college to learn about the Ocoee Election Day massacre. They know very little, many of them, about African American history. And so this content that we're generating is going to be incredibly useful for them. And again, just to echo what Rebecca said, how teachers and school districts implement this curriculum on a local basis is really up to them. The most exciting thing is that we're finally going to be able to give teachers in places like, say, Marion County, some Marion County specific stories. We have this incredible collection of freedom movement, civil rights movement stories from Marion County. For the first time ever, we're going to be able to share those with teachers in Ocala and environs. Same thing with Duval, same thing with Gaston County, same thing with Miami. So forgive me, I'm doing the history professor ramble right now because I'm just so excited. But I just wanted to remind us that we have a number of educational mandates that are wonderful mandates from the state of Florida, but they're unfunded. That's a challenge. And as Sherry Dupree and Jay Gordon can tell you, they've worked so hard in the Black History Task Force to try to get some content to people.
All right, thank you, Dr. Tees. So we're coming towards the conclusion of the program. We will stay around for another couple more minutes just to answer final questions. So one question that somebody wrote, are there opportunities for those leading this project to collaborate with advocacy groups, such as Black farmers or other groups?
Yes, please contact the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, and Adolfo will be kind enough to put our contact information in the chat bar. As we mentioned earlier, we're getting back into the field work and outreach business. And as Marta mentioned, we have been covering issues like what's been going on with the Groveland 4 case. We are going back to Mississippi this summer. We're hoping to get to Pensacola. There's a very rich African-American history community there that's asked to work with us. And so we're just kind of getting back into that phase. We're doing oral histories with Central High folks at Putnam County. I mean, the list goes on, but we want to get back in contact with communities across the region. So please let us know, contact us, and we'd love to talk to you. Another question is, all of Florida considered Gulf South? From a historian's perspective, yes. So the Gulf South covers everything, like in my mindset, from, Galveston, Texas, all the way down to Miami. So the Gulf South is really a part of that larger region, and includes Mexico too. And it also includes the Spanish-speaking Caribbean. And so it's a big chunk of real estate, and Florida certainly is a major part of that.
Okay, one of the questions that I saw on our Facebook page, what are some of the challenges that the AI team has been facing throughout the process of recording oral histories and into the system? Thank you.
Well, how long do you have? But we like the challenges. Every challenge is an adventure, and it gives us work to do and new things to discover. So one of the things that we've been looking at is kind of related to that, looking at the variation of speaking, is where do we see the African-American features occur? How are they represented in the transcripts? And what information does that give us about the transcription? How does the representation and transcription then affect the results from these models I was talking about? And is there a better way to do the representation that's both accurate, but also still readable to anybody who's going to come in and not have the linguistic background to know why we're marking it up this way? And yeah, all sorts of questions. So that's one challenge that we've been looking at recently. I think Kevin could probably talk some more about the issues with the speech and the audio, perhaps.
Yeah, the speech and the audio. So let's see, the challenges. So on the one hand, as Dr. Müller was saying, how we're basically looking at the transcript and see how to determine the level of representation that we want to be both accessible by laymen, but also usable and faithful to the actual speakers' languages. In the audio side, there's certainly issues because these audios are very authentic. Authentic means completely. You can the background noise condition might not be ideal. It's not like recorded in a professional studios, and sometimes being a completely authentic interview, you get the interactions between the interviewer and the interviewees. Sometimes they talk over each other, and sometimes because of the quality of the audio or because of how authentic the speakers are, it's not often easy to really identify and understood all the nuances in the language, as well as in some cases the content or the references that they were making. And so there are practical environmental challenges that comes with working with authentic natural data. And we actually embrace these challenges because ultimately, if we want to use these resources to build better language technologies, like imagine next time you talk to your Amazon Alexis or Google Siri and so Apple Siri and so on, they will actually be able to understand African-American language speakers better in an authentic environment, such as those recorded in the oral history archive.
All right, thank you, Dr. Tang. Okay, so right now we're coming towards the conclusion of the program. I just want to thank everyone here again, all the panelists for being here with us today and taking some of your time and spending a great, good amount of time with all of us and sharing wonderful news regarding the current project. I did want to mention to everyone out there that's listening right now, we do have availability year-round for volunteer opportunities with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. We're always looking for new folks to join us, whether you want to transcribe, join us on field work, or different opportunities in the program. You're more than welcome to join us, and I'm more than happy to provide more information on that end. If you could just email me at my email, I posted on the chat, adolforomero@ufl.edu. That would be great, and we'll be in touch with you. And if you want to find out more about our public programs, please visit us at our Samuel Proctor Oral History program page, and you will learn much more about the type of work that we do and types of projects that we're dealing with year-round. Thank you.